I am going to talk about the fall of Divergent because
Rest in peace.
rest in peace. I think it's really an interesting thing to see because it kind of was the end of the YA film boom.
It absolutely was. And may I just say, to begin with, I loved the books of Divergent
Yes, I
because
really
it
enjoyed.
was one of the. I felt like a lot of young adult books at that time were like centered around this girl who was like, I'm not very pretty, and then everyone was like, you're so pretty. Whereas I don't think Divergent did that at all, and they
No,
purposely, like, a lot of the time in the novel, point out, like, the fact that Triss isn't pretty, she's just this normal girl.
and she's
Like,
really
people
strong.
insult the way she looks a lot. Like, I
Yeah,
thought the book was really good at times. A lot of people say it's derivative of Hunger Games, but I, I don't know. It's kind of original.
she made a lot of money from it, so
Yeah.
I think
I still
even
like the books. I'd probably read them now and kind of enjoy them. Not the last one though.
no, and we will get on to that, but I think it was the downfall. But did you know that Veronica Roth was sold the first Divergent book when she was 21?
Yeah, well actually I thought she was 24, so that's come as a shock to me because I was going to say 24. That's old. Like I've got 2 years before that, but no, I didn't know it was 21.
21. So I
Good for
can
her.
kind of get it that she was watching and reading, probably reading like a lot of the YA stuff, a lot of the Harry Potter stuff, and this just millennial was like, well, I'm gonna write some as
Yeah,
well. Got an idea.
and I thought it
Um,
was good. Like it doesn't feel like it's written by a 21-year-old.
it really doesn't.
I feel like it reads very maturely for
Yes.
a YA novel. Yeah, gotta say it for Veronica.
And
Ronnie.
I really did enjoy the first two, I think, and I was
Yeah,
intrigued
first
by
two,
it.
iconic. Then,
Um, but then I think I read one of her dedications was to God, and I was really like, that's a bit weird.
oh, that rings a bell actually. And there's nothing wrong with that, but
Did God help you write this book? I don't think he did. But anyway, that's me being cynical,
yeah,
cynical
come on, Polly. Maybe
masochist.
God helped. Maybe one
Um,
day God will help you, Ryan, then you'll feel terrible about ever doubting Ronnie. Oh, young Ronnie.
oh, young Ronnie. So
Oh,
in 2018, BuzzFeed did a speculatory article on why it collapsed the way it did. And one of the reasons was that they said it just had such weak source material because the structure of Divergent's fictional world was hard to understand, the plots were hard to follow, and the stakes were unclear. The novels are confusing, humorless, and derivative, and by the third novel, they suggest that she had no real vision to conclude the story and just kind of
oh.
kills off Triss for no real reason.
I can't right. I think that's cruel for the first two books because I don't think that's true for them. But the last one absolutely is true. I think that book
Yes,
is it's almost impenetrable. It's way too confusing. And don't get
really
me
long.
wrong, I actually really like the idea of killing off like your narrator. The Triss
Yeah, I think
narrated
that's
the
a
two
huge
of the
leap.
books.
Yeah,
I think that's really cool, but she did it in a terrible way. Like
yeah,
so no, I think that's unfair on the first two books, but the last two absolutely is fair. There was
yeah.
no material there to be followed. But I mean, hot take. I actually kind of feel the same about the last Hunger Games book. The
Mm,
what's it called? See, it's so weak in my mind. I can't even remember the name of it.
Mockingjay,
Yeah,
is it?
Mockingjay. I find that book really hard to read. I don't think it's as good as the others. But that's my hot
Mm.
take of the day.
My hot takes about the Hunger Games was that I used to skip the after the first book and the first arena. In the second arena, I didn't read
Yeah,
the arena because I was so bored. I just
I
skipped.
get that. I only really read the. You know what? I feel like I mainly read the bits with Finnick, and then I can tell you
Yes, and then
I
when she
know right.
killed him off, I was like, oh,
See, that's a like he shouldn't have died because he went through way too much. But
yes.
that's just my opinion on that. But Mockingjay, I skipped so much of that book that I didn't actually realize that. God, what's her Prim? I didn't realize Prim had died. I had to read it again because someone was like, "Yeah, Prim dies," and I was like, "I
I
didn't see
missed
it."
that.
It didn't happen in my book, and then I went back and I was like, "She dies like in a sentence." So I was like, "Oh
Yeah,
God."
it's really short, isn't
I
it? Yeah.
skipped most of this book, so there was no way I would have realised she was dead. I
I was
realised
just
Finnick was dead
bored.
though.
I think I was bored of just them wandering about a city, and I was like, I don't care what
So weird,
more
like
stuff.
I didn't know where I couldn't picture where they were half the time. It
Yeah,
was very weird, and I was like, oh. And then they made the world into a arena, and I was like, oh.
Really. This
Suzanne,
is what she
this
knows.
has gone weird. This has gone weird.
So, yeah. So, and also I think by like 2017, people had given up after the franchise and the final book because they were disappointed with the ending. So it was like, why would we watch the final film?
Yes. And if you like the movies came out like kind of late, so if you think like
Yeah,
we'd all read them, like when we all read the Hunger Games, we were pretty young, and then the movies came
yeah,
out, and we were still young throughout all the movies. By the time the Divergent films were coming out, we kind of gotten older. So then
we've been
by the time
past
the
it.
last one would have come out, we wouldn't have really been that interested in seeing it. So it
No.
lost its audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I read this other article that was suggesting that like Triss's death was she sacrificed herself in a Christ-like fashion to save the world. I'd like to tell you that I think this was a masterstroke of brave originality from Roth, who drew a lot of her stuff from the Hunger Games, but in truth, I think the source of choice is pretty clear. As it turns out, Roth's a Christian convert and a Harry Potter fan, and in both these cases, there is a climactic moment in a similar decision to die for everyone's sins. There's a reason the story is archetypal, and also a reason Roth was therefore not wrong to reach for it, even if it wasn't original in strict sense.
Oh,
And so they're basically just saying she is taking it from the Bible and J.K. Rowling, because in both those it's like the main character died, the main character Jesus, they die, but then they get to come back. So like
yeah.
their sacrifice was for something. So so I was just interested to see what kind of criticism people had about the books because when you're enjoying something and you're kind of in the middle of it and you
Yeah.
don't know. It's interesting to see.
I know what you mean.
Vox was more scathing about Divergent. They thought it failed from the beginning because they called it an anemic excuse for pop culture. It borrows from the popular tropes of other YA franchises without understanding what makes them compelling.
Mm. I
And they
don't
just,
know. Like, I don't want to disagree with everything. This sounds like it's really one-sided. But if you take it from my brother, who is completely like does not read anything, knew nothing of YA, when
mm,
he watched the first Hunger Games film, he thought it was super boring. Really struggled to
really,
get through the whole thing. Yeah, I don't know. I also have issues with the first Hunger Game film because they filmed so much on shaky cam. I really don't like it.
mm,
Anyway, but I do like bits of that film. However, I understand why people might not like it if
yeah,
you didn't know the books, didn't know a lot of the context. But when we watched Divergent a few times, and I think he like quite liked it as a film. Like he thought it was pretty good. So pop culture wise, if you're going into it knowing nothing, I reckon Divergent would be like,
it's more enjoyable.
yeah. I mean, if you think about it, we're very much a generation of people who like think about how many Marvel films there are.
Oh
There's so
yeah,
many, and like, some of them are just bad, but people
hmm,
like them because it's like they can just wash over you, and you don't really need to pay attention.
yeah. You don't have
The
to, yeah,
Hunger Games, the first movie, is quite artistically done, and you have to kind of think about it and
mhm,
be engaged in it. You can watch the first Divergent film and be like, right, fair enough, which,
mm.
okay, isn't necessarily positive. However, doesn't mean it's bad, just means
And
it's
I
not.
think, yeah, I think it's the problems are that she probably had this really good idea, but then actually because all the things were franchised and everything had
Yeah,
to have like more and more books, more and more films, then it just fell apart because she didn't have the world building. She had a really strong first idea
yeah,
that kind of drew from, the Sorting Hat stuff, so everyone was in a faction, and then
yeah.
also like dystopian like Hunger Games, and everyone was just expecting it to be Games. It just wasn't. But the the way that YA was built up is you had to have sequels and sequels and sequels, and it just I think that ruins a lot of things because you can't. The idea should just be allowed to be itself in one thing. It doesn't have to like be explained or go further than what it did.
I mean, in a way, I do feel like the book had its limits because I was just thinking
Mm.
about it then, and I was thinking like, what possible way could they have ended those books? And I can't
I don't
think of
think they
like a
would have.
way
Yeah.
out of it. I,
Yeah.
I mean, in a bleak way, she could have had it where like, if you want to have Triss die, you could
Hmm.
have Triss finding out about the factions, being Divergent, and then her like attempting a rebellion and it not
Hmm.
working, and her dying for that, and then everything just staying the way it was. I feel like that'd be a bleak, cool way to do it.
Yeah.
But I don't know any way she could have ended it in the way she wanted to, where it had a happy ending. Because I don't know, like whoever said that the stakes weren't high enough, I kind of get that. I don't.
Hmm.
There are definitely limits to the plot.
Because it's all about, and I think the other thing that I was seeing against it was all about character investment and not actually about like structural
Oh, so does that
issues.
does that mean that like the characters are better than the actual plot?
Yeah, so it was all like
Because I fully agree with
self-sacrificing
that.
and all, it's not really about taking down the system of the structure, because actually when it was revealed that
Mm.
it was all about they'd been genetically changed and then fenced off in Chicago and just kind of left by the rest of the world, and the divergent and like the normal people that they're trying to breed out, and it's like an experiment, and you just think that's so weak. That's so like
Yeah,
a
I
weak reason
agree.
behind everything. But
Well,
as it, yeah,
that's probably why none of us liked the last book, because the
yeah,
characters were so good. Like, I love the characters, and I think Triss is a really good complex character for Tobias. I think he's a really good love interest that's still
yeah,
complex. Triss's brother, the most annoying person ever,
mm,
but pretty good as a character. They're like her best friend. Can't remember her name, but her like best friend. There was a lot of complex characters in that book, and
mm,
but the plot, yeah, I fully agree. I don't think the plot was as good as the characters.
yeah.
And it's a
So
kind of a silly like idea, isn't it? Like casting people into different sections. It's never going to work out because like being human isn't being one thing.
yeah.
So yeah, I'm seeing these points a bit more now.
But then we're also coming at it as adults, and
Yeah.
she must have made so much money from the books as like this 20-year-old. And she had three, well, they tried to split the last film into two, didn't they?
Yes.
So they did the like a part one, part two, which again was that really Hunger Games, Harry Potter trying to make as much money as possible.
And it always ends with one being so boring, though.
Yes, because they have to drag it out into
Can I
two
tell you this
feature-length
though? Do you
films.
know one film that did it well?
What film?
Free Dawn, because I know
I
you'll
think
probably
so.
disagree, but neither of them was boring.
No,
I was
I
never
agree.
bored.
I
It was
agree
the
with
Harry
that.
Potter ones and the Hunger Games ones. The first part of each one of them, I was so bored in
Yeah,
them.
you would have
Twilight,
guessed.
the first bit, she's having a weird demonic baby. Second bit, baby's growing up super fast, and she's like, they're meeting all these other vampires. How
They
good
did
is
that
that?
well. No, to be fair, even
Yeah,
though it like it again, nothing really happened. It was like they were gearing up for the big conflict that just kind of flopped. I agree. I think the way they did it was much better than, but that's why they think like she must. I'm glad she made as much money as she did, even though it flopped in the end.
and like to this day, I'd rather read. I actually, this is making me want to read Divergent again. I'd rather read that than go near a John Green book. I'm sorry, but it's true. I would. It might not be as good, but I just think it entertains me.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
still have like little pieces of paper. This is really sad. That I stuck in for like every like tris and four bit because I thought they were just so romantic. So maybe I'll just revisit that, flick through to like each bit. It's like here's the thing. I didn't really. I guess this kind of proves that the plot's not that good. I wasn't really that bothered about reading half of the plot, but
No, I was there for the
boy was I
will
invested
they,
in that
won't they?
romance.
Yeah,
Just
I 100% agree. And then some weird things about the film that I just found. Like,
yeah.
apparently Miles Teller didn't want to sign for the movie, and his persuasion was from Shailene Woodley saying that he would be able to punch her in the face on screen, and that's what like sealed the deal. I mean, it sounds like it's come from like
Oh,
a
because
gossip
they were in
website.
another YA film together.
Yes,
They
they
were
were.
in one. They were in one that I cannot remember the name of it, and
I can see it, but I can't
it had
tell you what it
big
is.
John Green vibes, and it was boring.
Yes,
Spectacular Now, I think
yes,
that's the
yes,
name of
yeah.
it.
They're in a
I
woods a
read
lot
the
of it.
book of it, just equally boring.